Hey, welcome to Roger That Chronicles. Sitting around this table is a bunch of veterans, and we're going to be discussing, as we normally do, a lot of interesting articles and items that are, we believe anyway, that are of interest to our fellow veterans. We want to thank 216 for engineering this program for us. And I'm Rick Prescott.
And I'm Mike Ruffner.
I am Jason Hertha, Prior Marine Corps, 0311 Grunt. Be sure to view our previous podcast. You could also catch us on YouTube. Please hit the bell notification, subscribe, like, as it helps us out with the algorithms, and also share as well, too. Check us out on Spotify, Twitch, Apple, and we want to thank our producers where we are broadcasting from 216net. Behind the camera and microphones is Tim Stewart, co-founder of 216thenet.
Good afternoon. Oh, good morning.
Roger That Chronicles is thrilled to introduce our guest, one of our early pioneers for modern air rescue in our military. Our guest, a Silver Star Medal recipient, and also received an Air Medal with a 10 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Air Combination Medal, and Presidential Unit Citation as a result of his 285 air rescue missions while he served in Da Nang, Vietnam between 64 and 65. He's one of the first rescue pilots who was.
Did I write something wrong?
Yeah.
Good to go, Rick.
It made it sound like he got shot down. But anyway, he would go after the shot down pilots over in Vietnam during the infamous Rolling Thunders, to name a few exploits. Joseph Phelan, the mic is yours.
Oh,
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm good.
All right.
It's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Well, it's great to have you here. It really is.
Well, it's been a number of years, to say the least, that my activity in Vietnam and in the Air Force took place. But it's amazing because the good Lord has given me the ability to remember most of it. And I enjoy going back and thinking about the lives that we influenced or allowed to continue to live in this world. And at the same time, the total unselfishness of our little detachment who arrived at Da Nang, RVN, in October of 1964.
Wow. Let me ask you, what influenced you to join the armed forces of the United States during a time, that particularly during that time of the war? It was kind of still in its infancy in many ways, but we were right in the middle of it. But what motivated you to join the Air Force?
Well, I grew up in a family of five, and my father was a Boston Irishman who was a Marine in World War II.
Hoorah! We like him already.
And he, again, as I mentioned earlier, he was a personnel manager at the Grumman Aircraft Factory in Trenton, New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
And one of the duties he had was, of course, he had a deferment of some type because of his position. But he had to notify employees, men and women, that their spouse was KIA or MIA or taken captive, POW, that kind of thing. And after a couple of years, I remember him coming to my mother and saying, I just can't do this anymore. And he went down and enlisted in the Marine Corps and went to Paris Island and Camp Lejeune and ended up out in, he never got out of the States. He ended up in Pendleton, I think, area where they were staging to invade Japan. And it was, of course, in August, they dropped the first bomb on Hiroshima. And everything changed after that. In a hurry.
Yep, real quickly.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I always had a fascination with aircraft, with planes of any type. And I remember when I was only 5 or 6 years old, living in Connecticut, I would watch the planes fly over. One of my favorites was the P-38 Lightning. I'm going back a while. I don't know whether that
Just a
sounds
bit.
familiar to you.
Perfectly fine.
P-38, yeah.
P-38, and of course I love the P-51 Mustang. Oh man! And I thought, this is funny, but I thought I was a reincarnated pilot, P-51 pilot who would come back. Yeah, but when I don't want to get too long-winded here, but my dad came to me when I was a junior in high school, I guess, and he said, "Well, Joe," he said, "I'm going to send you to college." I really hadn't given much thought at that point, and he said, "But one thing I want from you, I want to know what you're going to major in. I want to know what you want to be before I send you to college." And I told him I like biology, and I thought maybe pre-med. Well, at the end of my freshman year at St. Michael's in Vermont, my dad died. He died in my arms. He was only 43, and I was 19, and we were very close. And but my mother, they had saved money for me to go to college. So my mother said, "Your dad would want you to go back, so go back." And the first 2 years at St. Michael's was mandatory Air Force ROTC.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm off that.
First 2 years. And then you had a choice to go to advanced ROTC.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did that, of course, you got a chance to do a lot of different things, including soloing and learning how to fly.
Cool.
And so I went through that. And when I graduated, I was commissioned a Brown Bar, second lieutenant.
Oh, how about that? Moving up.
Yeah, right. I thought I was.
Right. With the flying and all that, is that something that you kind of had an inkling to do as a kid, or like what was the defining moment with your fascination with planes and wanted to be a pilot?
Well, from the time I can remember, like when I was 6 and 7 years old, I saw a lot of aircraft flying around because of the World War.
Right.
And I even remember when I was 10 or 11 years old, I built a bi-wing from scratch.
Oh, wow.
Put an engine on it and a propeller, and I flew that little biplane by control.
Really?
Control rods, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and
that's pretty neat.
It crashed once, but it didn't break. So I said, enough of this, and I hung it on the wall above my head, above my bed. I hung it on the wall.
Nice.
I always was attracted to that, and so.
No,
yeah, I remember.
In contrast, in my younger day, our biggest fascination was taking those little cardboard type of planes and throwing them.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, those
See if you
are
can hit
fun
your
too,
sister
yeah.
in the head with it, kind of thing.
Yeah, making paper airplanes, all that stuff.
With controls.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
My old man had one where you kind of glue these paper things together as like a wooden base and just fling it with like a rubber band slingshot sort of thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also grew up making the model rockets, so that was real cool. Where you stick to that. Probably kind of hard to find that unless you go to a hobby shop now, but hobby shops used to be all over the place. But I remember I made one that was modeled after the what was it? The NASA, spacecraft and all that.
Gemini and Apollo.
Yeah. So the one where it's basically kind of like an airplane sort of thing, space shuttle. So I named it the Challenger, and then yeah, it definitely crashed and didn't function properly because there's gas buildup where the parachute pops out and all that stuff, and yeah, it didn't work out that way. So, but oh yeah, that was a lot of fun building those sorts of things, and that's definitely really inspiring for kids to get into that type of stuff, especially when they're younger, instead of being on the phones and all that stuff. So
Definitely.
it's the critical thinking skills.
From our adoring public.
Oh.
Jim Jones says, "Great new intro. Love this show. Rick is a genius."
That wasn't me that did that, but I loved it.
It was Ken.
Hi, Kent. How you doing?
Kenny, you were first time caller? Oh, I love the emoji up there too. That's great.
That's perfect. So you went to Craig Air Force Base.
Yeah,
So you did a lot of pilot training there, and then after that, you went to survival school, things like that. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, when I got out of college, I had to wait 8 months before they called me in for pilot training. So had to get a job and hopefully get enough money to buy a little car and get around. And so I did that for 8 months. I did various jobs, and I was given the wrong information about, well, if you're going to be called in by the government in the military, no reputable company is going to hire you. Well, that was bad information. And so I went through a 20 all-night doll factory, making dolls out of plastics,
Yeah.
And then from there, so an artificial flower factory, and from there, collecting bad debts for beneficial finance company. And I finally got smart, and I went to this employment agency, and they came up with U.S. Plywood Corporation down on Fifth Avenue in New York. They were looking for a lab technician in their R&D lab.
Mhm.
So I went down there, and son of a gun, I got the job and started that. And then shortly after that, I got my orders, and so reported for the physical. And here we go with a Northeast boy being transferred overnight from New York to Selma, Alabama. It was quite an awakening, and continued to be. And I reported to Craig Air Force Base, as you said, Rick, and it was a year-long program, and we worked hard. We worked hard. They covered every aspect of what we want to do. Now, I was looking for a fighter jet assignment. That's what I had in the back of my mind when I got out of pilot training. However, the good old government came down with a list, and we had, I think, 35 guys in our class. And they came out with a list that had one F-102 assignment. All the rest were multi-engine and then helicopters. And I don't know what led me to, but I decided I chose helicopters, make a long story short. And I'm so happy I did. So I left pilot training, as you said, Rick, and went out to Reno State Air Force Base and went through a bunch of survival schools to start with, then went through an 8-month helicopter training.
What type of training was it with the survival school?
Various types. I went through four or five survival schools. The first one was more or less of an intimidation school where they would convince you were a POW and that you were under their complete control and that you would do exactly what they wanted you to do. And if you didn't, they would punish you. And the punishments were various. I remember one of them was they put me in a square box that I never, ever thought I would fit into. Mm-hmm. And they left me there. Huh. And the other one was interrogation, shock treatments, like, he had a glass of cold water, and I didn't pay much attention to it. And an unexpected moment, he threw it right in my face.
Wow.
Well, that was just to break you down. It was just to break down your resistance. And
right.
So that was school. And then they sent us out on 5 days into the Sierra Nevadas with a live rabbit, and told us we had to take a certain route to get back, but that we were going to be monitored, and if we made mistakes or made ourselves visible, etc., we'd be arrested. caught, captured.
Oh.
And being the stubborn Irishman that I am, I was captured in an open field at night. But they told us, they said, if it's at night and he can't see you necessarily, but he's calling out just to see if you'll bite. Okay, we see you out there. Come on, stand up, give up.
Oh, that's a
that
good
kind
little
of thing.
trick. Yeah.
And they said, if you don't move or say anything, chances are he's just baiting you.
Right.
Well, that's what happened to me. So I just wouldn't move. And he's standing right over me. But as long as he didn't touch me,
Right.
And so anyway, that was it was really interesting. We lucked out. We came across a creek with some fishing gear, and the trout were running in the Sierra Nevadas at the time. It was the springtime, and boy, we caught them and dried them over the fire, and we had plenty to eat.
Oh, nice.
That was good. And then we finally killed the rabbit. Nobody in my detachment or group wanted to kill the rabbit. Well, I was used to killing rabbits, so I just grabbed it by his hind legs and smacked his head against a tree and let them skin him. And then we ate him. He was good.
Good old Bugs Bunny.
But that was the first survival school. But then I went through jungle survival school in Panama, water survival school in the off coast of South Carolina, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so
a lot of that stuff was kind of mimicking the environment of where you were about to go. Because when I did cold weather survival training, but it was only for like 2 weeks, because when I got done with School of Infantry, I got orders to go to Afghanistan. So they're like, oh, it's probably all going to be cold up there and all that, and hilly environments, which is true. So they sent us for like a 2-week down and dirty course over at Bridgeport. So I can relate with the culture shock, where you're in really warm weather, and then you go all the way up north and stuff, and then it's like completely different, where it's like 35 degrees.
Nothing works right.
Nothing works right. You're there at like, I think we got there at like 1 a.m, so we're just trying to load all of our sea bags off these trucks and go right to bed. But that some of that stuff was brutal, that with the survival stuff. But I think it was probably because it was super cold out too. So definitely not fun.
It's crazy. It's like moving in slow motion when it's that cold.
When I'm thinking about the survival school during that time, I mean, that's pretty extensive. I mean, you did some survival for getting your own food, getting captured, interrogation, POW training, jungle training. That's interesting. I mean, I didn't realize they had been doing that back then in the 60s. I always assumed that took place in the latter 60s due to the Vietnam experience and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it was in place before.
Wow.
And they were pretty serious about it.
Yep.
One of the things they pulled on us was they dug a bunker and they filled it half with water, and you couldn't stand up all the way, and they put us in there all night long, and we couldn't lay down because of the water.
Yeah.
And you couldn't stand up because your head would hit, and that kind of wore us down over.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Well, eventually you got on the choppers.
Yes.
Did they train you guys specifically for rescue missions? Because that's what your forte became.
Well, the first thing they should train us for is to fly the damn thing.
Right.
Because my helicopter instructor, made fun of me because he knew I was a jet jockey coming out of pilot training at first, and he said, he took me on a ride, introductory ride, and then he turned it over to me. He said, okay, I want you to hover here now.
Right.
I was over controlling, and the damn helicopter was going back and forth like that. And he says, you guys are all the same. You over control when you just have to hold the stick like stick, quietly, and you'll be fine. I'm sorry. I made
fascinating. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. But I flew, let's see, 5 different types of choppers. And the last one I flew was in support of the Gemini and Apollo program in Florida, Patrick Air Force Base.
Oh, cool.
And I was flying the CH-3C. Woods Jolly Green Giant,
Okay.
and modified. And unfortunately, I got out before we were doing mid-air refueling. I never had a chance to do that, but they do that now.
Right.
Although I think that at one point, our little detachment out of Florida made the record for the longest over water flight. So by itself, a helicopter by itself. We flew from Cocoa Beach all the way down to Antigua, just before you turn south into South America.
Oh, wow.
And we went down there at the request of the British government to move a TV antenna away from the runway or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Wow. Wow.
How long does what's like the longest distance on average a helicopter can travel on like one one tank of gas or whatever?
Not far.
All right.
Not far.
Not far enough.
No, yeah, that's right. I don't know. I think maybe a couple hours, 1 hour out back, maybe an hour and 15 back, and then
Oh, wow. Okay.
not you got to get there in a hurry and do your job and get home.
Gotcha.
And
Wow.
because you don't have a lot of reserve.
Yeah.
Although in Vietnam, in the HH-43 that I flew, we put an auxiliary rubber tank inside the cabin
Okay.
that gave us an extended, because we never knew how far into Northern Vietnam we might have to go.
Right.
So after all your survival training and so forth, you ended up in Da Nang, Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
What was your mission there? I mean, when you first arrived, what was your experience like? And what was your your mission obviously was laid out to you. I mean, what happened?
Well, the short of it is that we had to be prepared to do any type of mission whatsoever that would involve a rescue or a help dropping food or medical supplies or whatever. We had to be prepared to do a civilian situation, emergency, or a military. And we never knew whether or not it would happen on the base or it would happen elsewhere. We were at Da Nang, and our area of operation went north to the DMZ. So went Da Nang, Hue, Quang Tri, and we were right on the DMZ at Quang Tri. Now, when I was over at Quang Tri, it was a quiet little village, but as the war developed, it got nailed. I mean, it was they came out of the DMZ and then destroyed the town and everything else. Of course, you know all about the Battle of Hue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was brutal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it
Was
was urban warfare, so that was something kind of new. Well, kind of. But yeah, definitely got developed later on with mount training. And when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, that's all it was, is this urban stuff, going in room clearings, all that good stuff. So
that's pretty tense.
yeah. I mean, it's we also did a lot of crap when we were in Afghanistan. We even did mine sweeping too. So we basically got in line looking for any debris or stuff that's out of place. One of my buddies like, man, I hope I don't win this game, but like we got so used to it where we're just cracking jokes and all that stuff. And I kind of had a feeling too that there was no mines in the field, but then again too, you never know. But none of us got hurt. None of us won that game. But yeah, we did village, searching through villages, urban stuff, but then stuff out in like open terrains, like in the mountains. So we were in a town called Dawit Shah doing stuff in the mountains, like right on the cusp of the Korengal Valley, where that was pretty dangerous over there and stuff, and we got hit over there too.
Sure.
But yeah, it's definitely gut wrenching for sure. But yeah, I mean, I did so many room clearings in Iraq where like it didn't even really phase me anymore, and I had a saw too, so you don't want to use an open bolt weapon for room clearing. You want some closed bolt, but it's my time, whatever. So, but came back in one piece. But Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
get it
you
for
look
sure.
pretty good for one piece here.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing too, like I got buddies of mine where their bodies are all broken down, stress fractures, all that stuff. So I got pretty lucky where I just had a little bit of tendon damage on my right ankle. Just sprained it so many times. So I was doing a patrol in Afghanistan. It was real dark out, and we had our MVGs on. So you need a little bit of moonlight for the loom to kind of amplify everything. And I'm walking. There's a huge like crater hole, and take a big old step, like fall like 2 feet in, and it was huge to where like it could fit a whole body in there. But I just heard my foot go crunch. I'm like, wow, that does not feel good, but I can't be screaming to give away our position and all that stuff. So I was, basically put my finger in my mouth, and then they come by. They're like, "You all right?" I'm like, no, I just sprained the shit out of my ankle. And then they had to pick me up. But then I had another buddy of mine. He comes running and then falls in the same hole. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff. But I definitely came back in one piece and able to go to the gym and all that stuff. And I try to take care of myself too, not let things go to waste, especially the joints as we get older, and especially for infantrymen too. I highly suggest you take care of the joints.
Amen.
So
Amen. That is so true. You're mentioning the dark hole that you fell into.
Yeah.
It brought to mind one of the scariest types of missions that we flew over there was at night.
oh yeah.
Because there's nothing. I mean, here in the States, you got some lights, but there's nothing there. You turn away, especially if you turn away and go out to sea.
Mhm.
Well, we had a 123 full of South Vietnamese paratroopers with an American advisor piloting it. And I don't know what happened to them, but they slammed into the side of a mountain just east of Da Nang.
Yikes.
And they were dead before they knew it.
Wow. Well, at least it was quick. So
It was quick, and we
Jeez.
went up and we tried to find them, and then I thought there would be a fire of some type, but
right.
this thing was just, we couldn't find them that night. We went back first thing in the morning when it was light, and we got them. But it's just nighttime over there was just terrorizing because there wasn't any, there was no markers on the ground or any
Reference
lights.
point.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, there was nothing. You were flying blind. You had to go on instruments. So my co-pilot, I'd go on instruments and I'd tell him, look out the side on this side because we know there's a mountain over there. Just don't let me get too close to it. I mean, it was that kind of stuff. You're flying by hand.
Right.
And so
Well, I understand you did a bunch of rescue type of stuff. They had a flood there, things like that.
Mhm.
You did some rescuing and all of those type of missions prior to the big battles and so on. You got oriented.
exactly.
You became oriented with Vietnam. You became oriented flying in the area, the
Yeah.
nighttime flying and so on.
Well, it was a real challenge over there because, I got there in October, as I said, and from October to March, it's monsoon.
Oh wow.
And
You don't want to be flying in that.
Oh, it's terrible. The downpours and
Right.
torrential and the winds and all that. And yes, there were thousands of Vietnamese were killed during this flood, but I understand that they have it almost every year.
Oh.
So anyway, that was 6 months monsoon, 6 months dry. And
Wow.
we did learn a lot about the terrain, and we didn't learn enough about it. We lost one of our choppers because he went to rescue a L-19 with 2 Marines in it,
Okay.
and they slammed into side of a mountain
Ooh.
at night, and it burst into flame. And unfortunately, we were lost.
Ooh.
But we responded. I wasn't flying it, but one of the guys responded, and as soon as he got there, half hour after he got there, he was shot down. And so now you had the helicopter on top of the L-19,
Oh wow.
and then they called me to try to help
Mhm.
where necessary. So I'm hovering over this site, and it's just pitch black, and the trees are all above me, and it just was. You had to hold it. You had to be so stable. I remember my crew chief was on the ground. He was directing me. He said, "Okay, Joe, 2 feet to the right." Well, I'm 60 feet in the air.
How do you do
Sure.
2 feet?
And how do you measure 2 feet to the right?
Let me get the tape measure out.
Okay. But anyway, that was the kind of thing that and we had to blow up our helicopter, of course. It couldn't salvage it.
Right.
So
Wow. Wow.
Joe, you flew a lot of missions over there. There had to be a close call or two. You got out by the skin of your proverbial teeth. Do you recall any of those?
yeah, sure. There were those types of missions, and then there were other missions that a life was at stake, but you were not up against the enemy. For instance, a rescue in the South China Sea, and he punched out. He's in his raft and he's popping smoke, and so that's that's an easy one. But
you got to get out there before the VC go out there.
oh
to
yeah,
grab 'em.
because sure they had boats out there,
Right.
and, but our main mission when we were sent to Vietnam as a United States Air Force search and rescue detachment was North Vietnam. Why North Vietnam? Because that's where the hierarchy predicted we would lose the most aircraft on the bombing runs, and most pilots would be have to eject over the land, even though they knew if they could get their craft out to the water, it would be easier. And so when Rolling Thunder, the first strike was 2nd of March, 65. And we were sent up to Quang Tri to stage there. And at that first mission, let's see, it was Navy, it was Air Force, might have been Marines flying jets.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, but anyway, the missions outlined were more towards the southern part of North Vietnam, across the DMZ.
Right.
And what they were trying to do is to lessen the impact that the Ho Chi Minh Trail had on supplying the Viet Cong and the the NVA. So, yeah, we went up Quang Tri and then bang. These we left more F-105s in the ground over there than I care to think about. I think anybody will tell you that. But there were 6 aircraft shot down in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes.
I think you're talking about Operation Rolling Thunder now.
Yeah,
aren't you?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was the first mission of Rolling Thunder.
That was actually planned by President Lyndon Baines Johnson
Correct.
and Robert McNamara, the whiz kid.
Correct.
And here they were back in Washington, D.C., trying to manage an attack in North Vietnam with our military from thousands of miles across the seas.
Right.
And it's crazy for me, to try to comprehend that.
Well,
But you're actually on Rolling Thunder. You're on that operation.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and we were very fortunate. What we did out of Quang Tri, we flew east out over the water before we turned north. We didn't want to go across the DMZ because they had AA and ground fire, and you're just being stupid if you do that. But we went north until we thought we were about opposite of where they had punched out, and then we went in right on treetop level. A lot of ground fire. Mostly small arms.
Okay.
Mostly small arms at that point. And we took a number of hits, and this is after we had gotten this Vietnamese pilot. It was fun. That was a funny part too, because he was kind of burnt up a little bit, but he was okay. And my crew chief somehow got across to him that we were going to go back in where he had just come out of. And he looked sick.
He didn't like that idea.
Oh, no, that was not a good thing for him. No.
See ya.
Yeah.
Can understand
But
that.
he couldn't do anything about it because he's in our chopper.
Yeah.
He's not going anywhere. But in any case, we went in and I spotted a chute. We are a crew. our crew was great. Our pararescue man, PGA, we called him,
Mhm.
and then our crew chief, they worked in tandem back there in the cabin, and they did such great work. It's tremendous. I can't tell. I can tell you story after story about their dedication and their courage and their proficiency
Yeah.
in what they did. And
Wow.
so we went in and we spotted this chute, and then elephant grass over there, grows real high. And when you're walking around in that elephant grass, you can't see anything, around you. You could be, yeah. So I let him down on the hoist, and he got to the parachute, and then he found the helmet of the
Oh, wow.
the pilot who had ejected. He
Yeah.
got out of there so fast, he left his helmet, and on his helmet was his name. And I think I can mention his name.
At this stage, I think
at
we
this-
can.
Yeah, I think it'd be fine. So,
It was Gene Lockhart.
Gene
Yeah,
Lockhart.
Eugene, but on the helmet it was Gene Lockhart.
Mhm.
Wow.
LOCKHARTD. And damn, we looked for him, and we couldn't find him. Well, all right, this is a little long, but anyway, he was captured. He tried to do E&E down into South Vietnam, and he almost made it, but then he fell asleep in a barn.
oh no,
And a farmer
got him.
got him and turned him over. And he spent 7 or 8 years in the Hanoi Hilton because of that. And we saw him in 1973. He was one of the POWs that got off the aircraft, released prisoners.
Wow.
And they called his name, Gene Lockhart. And I felt like, on one side, I felt like $1 million. On the other side, I said, oh, crap. For lack of a few minutes,
Right.
we missed him.
Right.
We got 5 out of the 6 that had punched and ejected, but yeah, but he came back. He looked pretty good.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, at least he came back. So that's good.
Amen. And so then my commander, who it didn't make a difference when we were flying whether or not my commander was not in command.
Mhm.
We would appoint a command pilot for the mission, and I happened to be the command pilot for the mission. So he spotted something, and he spotted a little wisp thin of smoke coming up out of the jungle.
Mhm.
And when he got there, they discovered trees were like 130 feet high. They were unbelievable,
Jesus.
unbelievable vegetation and stuff. And they determined that this pilot was down there in a creek burning his papers. He was burning any identification and all that kind of stuff. And that pilot never expected to see a chopper hovering over him to pull him out of there.
Yeah, but
Got him out.
nice.
Wow.
Got him out, and yeah. So, gosh, I got shot up, and that's where I nursed the helicopter back to Way,
Mhm.
because there was a runway there. And that's where I had to leave it overnight, like I
Right.
mentioned before. So anyway, that was we were always taking ground fire. Sometimes we knew it,
Mhm.
sometimes we didn't. And the times that we knew it, well, we heard it, yes, but then also when we landed, our crew chiefs would find the holes in the
Oh, so
and
unexpected.
that
Oh, yeah, you got some
Yeah,
stuff right there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I saw in a hangar in Da Nang, an F-105 put out a commission with one single bullet hole in it.
Wow.
It had miraculously cut a control cable when it went in, and the pilot got it down, but it was not operable
Right.
for a while
That,
until they
right?
fixed that thing.
Wow. That's pretty amazing in its own right. I mean, you lose controls, that's usually game over.
Oh boy, that's for true. I don't know whether I've answered the question that you posed to me.
No, I'm
Sort of question.
totally
Oh,
listening.
what's your question?
Totally listening. You know.
Yeah, we and the other thing that bothered us quite a bit was as it heated up and heated up and heated up through 65. we had more news reporters running around the base
Mhm.
to shake a stick at. And as soon as you got back, they would come right up to you and they started trying to get you away to interview you.
Right.
And most of the stuff we couldn't tell them.
If I might, that's the fascinating thing about the reporting that had taken place in Vietnam throughout the Vietnam War. Everyone likes to think that these people were embedded. Well, certainly they were embedded, but you didn't get those reports. We got the reports from the newscast people that were in the big cities.
Correct.
And so, no doubt about it, there's a different story to be told of those personnel that were on the battlefields or in the air around the battlefields, as opposed to those that might filter a story or just hearsay stories from the places like what's in the larger cities, like even in Way. If you got some reporter sitting in an office, what is he going to hear? He's going to hear a disgruntled guy that just lost a bunch of his friends, and he's going to say this war really stinks, and that's what he's going to hear, and that's what he's going to report. And so that's what I'm saying. It's just a difference between those stories and everything else. The other side of this coin too. I'm gonna throw this in if you will. Think about World War II. If somebody went down in France or Belgium or whatever in World War II, they were pretty much a goner. They were either killed or captured. The ones that did manage to get away were those that probably made it out in the ocean, where a plane would drive by or fly by, and those seaplanes, and drop a boat near them or something.
Sure.
And these guys would have to fend for themselves and try to, survive that way and get rescued by sea. Sea was the place to go. But if you landed on the ground, you're pretty much a goner or a POW.
You were not going to walk out.
Exactly. Korea was almost the same thing, because what was his name? Sikorsky developed the choppers at the time.
That was the CH-3C Sikorsky.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are the plane or the aircraft that we had during those times, other than the jets and so on. But as far as choppers were concerned, so really they didn't do a heck of a lot. They did a lot of wounded extracts and supply runs, things like this, but they didn't do a heck of a lot as far as rescue missions were concerned. Vietnam was when it was really defined and where it was enhanced. I mean, maybe between Korea and Vietnam, they came up with strategies and with all the survival training and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time you got there, but really, it's one of the reasons why I mentioned in the introduction side that you're one of the pioneers. And certainly there were a few before you, but you were one of the pioneers that honed those skills to the point that for others to be able to follow. And that's pretty amazing to me. I mean, just to think about that particular side of it. That's incredible,
Well, you develop an operational manual over time,
right?
and you concentrate on what worked and ignore what didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a process, as you say, Rick.
Right.
Over time. Yeah. But
the guys that are doing this now, the para rescue personnel,
Yep.
and so those guys they learn from reading your books. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They learn from the tactics and the strategies that you guys have developed over time.
That's
And
right.
these guys are very proficient in what they do today.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I my hat's off, as I said earlier, to my pararescue guy and my crew chief. They worked in tandem. My pararescue man was a guy by the name of John Young, and he was from the West Coast, and he was a madman. He was a madman. He was 20, 21. I mean, just turned me loose, and unfortunately, he's gone home to the Lord. But he would call me after we got back from Nam, and he would visit the Midwest once in a while, and he would call me and say, "Hey, Joe, let's get together. We need to go out and abuse our bodies." And of course, I'm getting old. That's the last thing I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a great guy, and they all were great. They all were terrific. I had a senior master sergeant knock on our barracks door, and one day after a particular rescue,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a big bottle of Crown Royal.
Oh boy.
And he said to me, I'll never forget this. He said, "Well, Joe, I don't know how smart you are, but you sure as hell can fly that aircraft." And he opened the bottle, and there were 5 or 6 of us, and we sat down.
Yeah.
And I took a big gulp of it. He said, "No, Joe, it's sipping whiskey."
Yeah, it's something I would do. So
Sipping whiskey.
yep.
Oh, okay.
You gotta savor the aromas and the oakiness and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you earned, at one point, the Silver Star. And that, to everybody knows, that's a very heroic award to earn. And usually it takes a lot in order to receive this recognition. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
A little bit.
I love it.
That's okay. Well, being in the right place at the right time to be able to do the right thing is so important. And when you're placed in a situation like that, you fall back immediately on your training.
Mhm.
And you do what you have practiced and been taught to do, hoping that you will be successful in the endeavor that you're doing on. And also, as you mentioned earlier, Rick, Lyndon Johnson was personally involved with this Rolling Thunder. I don't know about McNamara. He was building Fords. And, maybe that was his strength. But, this body count business and everything else, I
Right.
didn't really identify with, nor did any of the commanders over there, or very few. But we got the call that
Speaking of getting a call.
yeah. We scrambled and went in and got 2 pilots that had ejected. And we took a lot of ground fire, and it was a 2.5-hour mission. So we were exposed. We were in North Vietnam, where we weren't really supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the pilots weren't even briefed that we would be in North Vietnam.
Oh.
That's what we were told by the pilots. We didn't expect you. So I don't know what went wrong there. But anyway, we were called to pick them up. So we took off and went into North Vietnam, and were fortunate enough to spot them in a reasonable amount of time and get them out of there continually under ground fire. Maybe more than ground fire, but we were fortunate. I had a hole put through my rotor blade, which normally might have required me to set it down there. But for some reason or another, we limped across the DMZ and got the Quang Tree.
Wow.
And we landed, we put it down there, and then we transferred the pilots to ambulances. But I don't know. I think the length of the mission, the severity of the possibility of being shot down, and all that stuff, it was surreal, because it seemed to me that we were doing everything by rote. We just by instinct. We were doing things by instinct, and to get the pilots out and to survive ourselves. And 2.5 hours is a long time to be under that kind of
absolutely
pressure, And so we were told that Lyndon Johnson was personally monitoring the activity when it was going on. Maybe in that situation room that they have, or whatever.
Right.
Somehow they had connections. I don't know. So it got a lot of publicity because number one, nobody knew we were supposed to do that. Number two, they didn't anticipate us being as successful as we were in getting those pilots out of there, so on and so forth. So when we landed at the next day, when we landed at the base, here come reporters and stuff.
Right.
And along with them was a base personnel manager. And he said, guys, we're going to put you in for the Silver Star. Or he said that to me. He'll put me in for the Silver Star as a result of the mission. And I said, okay, that's fine. If that's what you want to do. Yeah. He said, chances are they'll be downgraded, but it wasn't. And I said to him, and please believe me, I say this in all humility. I said to this base personnel manager, I said, you can put us in for what you want. But I said, whatever you put us in for, you're putting in for 8. The 2 chopper crews, the PJs,
Right.
All
Right.
8 of us operated as a team. And if one of us is going to get something, we don't want it unless all of us get something. And geez, lo and behold, maybe it was because of the publicity of it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But in a short time, it came back approved.
Wow.
And you say, I don't know who has to sign off on that, but it's pretty high. It's the third highest. I believe it's the third highest for Valor, I guess.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, yeah.
Well, you mentioned a PJ when you guys went down and you found the pilot's helmet and so on. That's probably the first time that American had jumped out of a chopper in North Vietnam. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I believe you are. I believe you are because I think there was some Air America activity and.
Oh yeah, the
CIA.
with Mel Gibson. Yes.
I'm sure it really wasn't Mel Gibson though.
No, Mel Gibson and Robert Downey Jr.
There was, and then it was taking place in northern Laos.
Okay.
And a lot of people didn't know about that.
Yeah.
And so, maybe they put some PJs and people down in Laos, but we didn't know of any that had been put down on the ground and walk around, except John Young and we thought it was the first time that pararescue's feet touched the North Vietnam soil.
Wow.
That's what I still think that.
But from a metaphorical point of view, okay, you had PJ touching ground on his boots in North Vietnam. You're flying over to DMZ. You're in the middle of a bee's hive of activity, bullets flying everywhere. And in the meantime, Jan, we can't forget about Jan. She's at home.
Oh,
And in a lot of ways, her feet are on the ground, right alongside you guys.
amen to that. I have made it my business. Jan knows this. I made it my business whenever I think of it and could insert it into the type of sacrifice that Jan made for our family. I remember leaving for Nam and looking at her through an anchor fence, and she had Lynn, our oldest daughter, and Michael, our oldest son, both still in diapers, and she was 6 months pregnant.
Wow.
Oh man.
And she did not want to go home to her parents. She wanted to do it herself.
Right.
And she did it herself. I just can't tell you how strong she was through that whole 15-month period. And she paid the price. She got to the point where she really, in the last 3 or 4 months, had to go home to her mother and father.
Right.
because what I was told was that the doctor told her, either you go home to your mother and father and get help, because she had 3 under 3 and she wasn't getting any sleep and all that stuff. She couldn't even remember her phone number sometimes.
Right.
He said, either you go home and get the help, or I'm going to call somebody in Washington and get Joe home. And I never knew that till I got back.
Mhm.
I'm glad you didn't get me home.
For the benefit of our listeners, Jan is here in a studio, and welcome, Jan. It's good to see you.
Joe, we see all the time in movies, the pilots out there with a picture of their loved one in front of them. Did you have something with Jan that you kept close by so that you could keep her in memory, or was it just in your heart?
No, both. I had a prayer card. I had a prayer card that I said, asking the good Lord to protect me and allow me to get home. And that brings to mind a couple of things on specific 2 areas, 2 times when I was over there. I experienced the most empty feeling I've ever had in my life. The first one occurred when I was standing in the hangar. Why it came about, standing in the hangar at Da Nang by myself, and I was looking out at the rain coming down, and I kind of a gloom came over me, and I said to myself, I had 10 more months to go, and I said to myself, I said, Joe, I don't know whether you can do this. You know, I don't know whether you can do this. And it stayed with me, but I shook it off. And then the second time was even more intense. It was when we penetrated North Vietnam over land on that first mission. As we crossed the shoreline, and we were, like I said, right on treetop level, we had to be. And we were moving around, jinking and janking. And the thought came over very strong to me, Joe, you may never see your wife and kids again.
Right.
And that really, really nailed me.
Yeah, it definitely hits home for sure. Wow. Oh.
You know, back in the 80s, they actually interviewed all the living Marines that had the Congressional Medal of Honor. And one of the things, and it's probably in the same fashion of your conversation, is that when they were at, when The Walking Dead was in Nam and they were fighting in A Shaw Valley, is that they basically turned around and kind of just ripped everything from them, that their family, the bills, this, that, it became irrelevant to what was going on in combat. And they felt that once they unloaded all the burden they had with everything else, and it was strictly combat, that their skill to be able to fight and live through it was actually better. There was like 3 or 4, a couple more generals, a couple full bird colonels, but that's what they kind of relayed, is that, hey, I'll probably never go home. They had to just kind of put everything else aside in order to focus on the combat part.
Absolutely. And I think in so doing, they became more efficient, because that was their sole.
Yeah, because nothing else. What can they do back home?
That's
Mom's
right.
car doesn't work.
No.
Bills are.
I think maybe that went through them, I don't know, but it went through their mind is, I have got to perform at the height of my efficiency in order to go home.
Right.
That ring a bell at all?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was gonna
You bet.
not make it in one piece. So yeah, well, we're about to wrap it up here. Quick question, really quick. Do you have a favorite helicopter movie?
Well, yeah, We Were Soldiers.
Really? Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Snake.
Okay.
Remember
Nice.
Snake?
I haven't seen that in a while, but I remember, the action sequences were fantastic.
Yeah.
So my favorite helicopter movie, Blue Thunder, with Roy Scheider, but he also plays a Vietnam veteran back at home, but then he's like doing the police helicopter stuff and flies this experimental helicopter. Really cool game of cat and mouse type movie. So made back in the 80s. But anyway, so Yeah.
Before you close out, I just
Yeah.
want to mention, Rick, I think you're going to need to have Joe back because we didn't talk about the NASA recovery. We didn't talk about the.
Oh, I
A
know,
lot
but
of
we didn't
different
talk
things.
about interviews with Walter Cronkite, the Today Show, and we didn't talk about your missions with Apollo and Gemini.
Yeah, that was
And
great.
there's
Yeah.
so many things you had as far as military matters are concerned.
Yeah.
In your short career, you had one heck of a career filled with a whole bunch of elements involving our history, including the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, my timing has always been pretty good.
It's pretty awesome.
I mean, I was in from 61 to 67.
Okay.
And Cuban crisis,
Yeah,
Nam, and then the space program.
Wow.
that's incredible.
Yeah,
So that's a nice
That's a big
combination.
span.
Yeah,
that's
that's,
an entire decade of
that's like of a
history.
resume right there for sure.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah, definitely have to have him back for sure.
Oh, we're gonna have to have
I'd
you
love to
back.
come back.
Yeah.
If you guys are silly enough to have me back.
Absolutely.
We'll have to bring you back.
All
for
right,
sure.
sounds good.
You know.
All right. So please, if you like what you hear, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for the YouTube portion of it. Share the video because it also helps out with the algorithm as well too. Please pass the word to watch us on, to listen to us on Spotify, Apple, Twitch, Apple, and 216 Net. We want to thank you for producing this podcast.
Our next show is going to be on August the 17th, where we're going to have a really super guest speaker on board, Joy Avang, who is a local author who had collected a large number of veteran military stories, many of them locals and so forth. Some of them we know, men and women and nurses and so forth. And she wrote several books, and 3 of them are entitled "Fly the Flag for Me." And just the story behind the name of the book is just incredible. She's going to be a great asset to have on board. So she covers everything from World War II to Desert Storm, firsthand narratives from men and women that served the American Armed Forces. So having said that,
We want to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us. We hope that you enjoy and appreciate what we are doing. Our mission is to provide a service to the fellow veterans by discussing issues we can relate and is of interest to us. If you're a veteran and you have not already done so, reach out to your local Marine Corps League, VFW, American Legion, Polish Legion, Fleet Reserve. There's all kinds of different veterans groups that you can find yourself a home and participate. And it may help you out, or better yet, you may help out other veterans, especially for those who have some issues that are going on and they can only relate with other veterans too. So we'll see you on August 17th.
looking forward to it. Thanks again.